But the bulk of the half an hour is going to be Aliki walking us through how Arsenal are using the platform and some of the wider pieces of that content chain as well. We will have time at the end of the session for questions and answers. So at the bottom of the Zoom webinar link, you should be able to see a Q&A button. Please just type them in whenever they occur to you. We may respond to some on our keyboards, as it were, while we're going. But otherwise, what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll address some of those questions at the end of the session. You'll also see towards the end a poll pop up. Just ask you a couple of questions if there's anything that hasn't been answered, or if you want any more information from us, then let us know and we'll get back to you after the session there as well. Great. Okay, so Aliki, I'm going to throw over to you first. I think you're going to screen share, I believe.
Yeah, I've got a couple of supporting slides. I'll get those up. Bear with me 2 seconds.
No problem. Stuff. You can see that.
Excellent. Just checking you can see the slide.
Yeah, got it.
Cool. So, hello everyone. I'm Alec Rodgers from Arsenal Football Club. I'm the senior production engineer here. I work very closely with our media team and oversee the majority of our broadcast facilities, as well as sort of our production suites across 3 sites. We do, as mentioned, we operate across 3 sites, some of which you may be familiar with. So we have our Emirates Stadium, where we have our green screen studios, obviously where matches take place, and the majority of our sort of broadcast exchange, so where third-party OB companies are coming in, plugging into our infrastructure. We also have our offices, which is around the corner from the Emirates, where we have our main edit facility. And we also have our training ground, which we do have some small edit resource up there, but it's also where a lot of our capture takes place, whether it's filming training, press conferences, player interviews. We do, so in our offices, we have our main edit facility. We are an Adobe Premiere edit house, so all of our editors are using Adobe Premiere Pro, and all of our content is stored on an online storage. So this, just to give an idea, this is all pre-COVID. This is before working from home and when everyone was in the office. So everyone was editing off a nearline storage, which sat in our offices at Highbury House, which is 500 terabytes online, allowing people to scrub footage very, very quickly. Everyone's laptops was connected onto a 10 gig line, allowing very, very quick access and remote scrubbing of very, very large files. In addition to this, we also have an LTO tape archive where we send older footage and older content out. Compared to, say, a lot of edit production companies where they're filming for a feature, they're editing it, they're delivering it, setting it off. All of those rushes tend to not ever be used again, so they'll be archived off and very rarely retrieved. With the way that we're producing our content, we do find that we're having to dip back in again, reuse content fairly regularly, whether this is historic trophy lifts, whether it's famous goals, etc. Things never sort of get archived off forever. So having the ability to recall things fairly quickly has been really critical. I'll come on to how Blackbird has assisted with that as well in a bit. We also have a green screen studio, which is based in the Emirates, where we produce most of our OTT content. And during COVID, we also fired up a virtual studio, which sits in AWS, which has allowed us to continue our OTT content while not being able to access some of our facilities. We have a media team, which I'm supporting, of about 45 people. This includes our journalists, our production team, where there's video editors and camera editors. And just going on to the next bit. In terms of what we are producing, we have quite a few different sort of deliverables that we work with. One of the largest ones is what's known as the International Program Block, or IPB. This is a set of a fixed amount of content that we have to deliver each week, which is delivered over satellite and goes to international takers and TV companies around the world. I believe at the moment it's sort of getting close to 20 million homes this is reaching, and it goes from territories from Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, anywhere where we may have rights to match content. As I'm sure you're all aware, in terms of in the UK, match footage is owned by the major broadcasters. We also do a reasonable amount of long-form content, whether this being magazine shows, so we do 2 different 30-minute documentaries every week. We do also do our season reviews at the end of the year, in addition to some special features every now and then. You may be familiar with the Invincibles, which we did a few years back, which made all the way to iTunes, etc. But as you can imagine, the majority of our content now, and the majority of our consumer base, is on social channels and social platforms. For example, on Twitter, we're hitting nearly 18 million followers, and we've got a huge amount of interest and demand for our content, whether this is carves offs from interviews, whether it's bespoke content for social, whether it's match clips, whether it's parts from our OTT. We also run a few different live offerings. In terms of what we can do live matches, where obviously our hands are tied to an extent in terms of showing Premier League games ourselves, as these are all owned by the big broadcasters. We do run an OTT show on match days, which is hosted on our website. So we do our own pre-match, halftime, post-match show, in addition to audio commentary. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is the Breakdown Live, which runs every match. We also do stream online a lot of our own matches that we do have rights to, whether these are under 23 games, recently some women's games, and pre-season friendlies. And we've also recently launched a Twitch channel, which is Arsenal Official, which was launched about a year ago, and we're doing quite a lot of content on there. So the world is definitely changing in terms of where content is going to and where the demand is, whether this is younger audiences, people being more social savvy, and everyone having access to various social content. We also find ourselves supporting internal events, whether this is partnerships, supporting various initiatives or activations for new partners, or whether it's internal staff events. So that's sort of a little overview about how we operate, a little bit of our facility and what we're delivering. And I'll hand back over to Ollie for a little bit more on Blackbird before coming to the demo.
Thanks, Aliki. Really interesting. I think, and you're being a little modest. I think I read somewhere that across all of your platforms and social platforms, it's 70 million followers or something like that.
It's a lot.
Huge audience. But I think the other, the really interesting thing about, what you guys are doing is, as a football club without an media team within it, you're essentially operating in every way that, a broadcaster would, the types of content you're creating, live studio content and everything like that. But at the same time, you're doing it working around the live broadcast rights that you mentioned, right? So you've got this core product, but actually it's the way that you create content around it that becomes the most important thing, how you distribute that, use it in different ways in different geographies and all the rest of it. So yeah, very, very interesting. Excellent. So yes, I will I'll do a bit of background or a bit of an introduction on Blackbird as well, like I said, for anyone who's less familiar with us, before we have a look at how it's actually being used. So hopefully, if you're joining us, you do know that Blackbird is a cloud-based video editing platform. But essentially, what we do is we change the way that our customers access media. So we have a patented technology that's been developed specifically for navigation, access, and manipulation, therefore editing of video content in a browser interface. So what we're not doing is moving content in and out of our own platform. We're not using standard web technology or hosting virtual machines for desktop applications or any of the other workflows that people have to essentially try and hoist traditional workflows into the cloud. This has been designed from the ground up to change how that happens. And as we'll talk about with Aliki in the demo, the net result of that is that our customers get to keep the infrastructure that they use. It can be on-premise, it can be in the cloud, it can be file-based or live stream workflows. They can follow their traditional and content chains and storage infrastructure and so on, but open that up and get easy browser-based access to that video to be able to create and share and collaborate and so on. And we summarize this really when we talk about three of the key things that we look to deliver for most of our customers. It's often about speed. So how can we get working on live content as quickly as possible? And how can we get that out to our consumers and out to our endpoints as quickly as possible? Flexibility is super important. That's a really important one, I think, for today is having, as I've said, the ability to have different workflows for different teams, collaborate and mix and match and really kind of build something that's not restrictive on top of that. And certainly in the last year and a half or so, we've seen the importance of having resilient systems in place come in. So reliable and adaptable solutions that allow businesses to be resilient and to cope with whatever might get thrown at them. And you don't have to take my word for it. Blackbird's been working with some of the biggest names in sports and broadcast, both across news and entertainment and so on. And the partner ecosystem for us is particularly important as well, to make sure that we fit into these workflows as easily as possible. We're not going to dig too deep into this today because obviously we're focusing on Arsenal, but as you can see here, we address a variety of things from traditional post-production, A&E networks, across cloud, OTT, and VOD workflows with Univision you can see up there, through, as I said, to daily news and live sports highlights editing and everything in between. So we're gonna leave it there because we want to get to the really interesting bit and pass back over to Aliki. But as I said, there's been plenty of opportunities for questions, and more than happy to talk to anyone, obviously, outside of the webinar as well. Aliki, I'm going to hand it back to you and let you do all the hard work now.
Cheers, Ollie. Bear with me 2 seconds. I'll just get my screen share up.
Excellent.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to share my whole screen because the browser is going to get a little bit messy. So before I get too much into the content itself, I thought I'd give a little bit of a sort of a background about ourselves and Blackbird. We first came across Blackbird, probably it was about midway through 2019, having spoken to Ollie about it. We were previous users of Snappy TV, for some of you who may remember that, which was a sort of a fairly rudimentary and affordable live clipping tool, which was very popular. This had its service terminated in sort of the end of 2018, and we were on the lookout for a new sort of live clipping tool, allowing us to send RTMP feeds into an endpoint and for our journalists to very quickly be able to clip content. So I think our original use or planned use case for Blackbird was very different to how we ended up deploying it and using it. So we had a few conversations about Blackbird, and as I mentioned earlier, prior to COVID and working from home, we were very much set up for all of our infrastructure for our editors to be working on site. We tend to work with very, very heavy files, which tend to run, so ProRes 42, which for those who don't know, it runs at about 1 gigabyte per minute. So match halves are looking at over 50 gigabytes. So the moment we found COVID, as I'm sure it's impacted with everyone, and the alarm was raised that we're going to have to be working from home, we had to come up very, very quickly with a plan of how we could facilitate our editors to work from home. After speaking with Hugh and Ravi, several guys with Blackbird who've been absolutely fantastic at getting this off the ground, we had a thought about how we could utilize Blackbird's file-based editing, which was definitely a unique part of Blackbird compared to some of the competitors, which focused on live editing without file-based editing. We run a production management system in our office, which allows all of our assets to be aggregated and tagged. And we needed to find a way for our editors to access this content, clip out the bits that they needed, and edit on these at home. Now, as previously mentioned, some of these files are huge, and people's home internet is not going to be able to be very efficient at getting huge amounts of files down in order to edit off and clip out very small sections. So, for example, if you're working off full match files to create highlights, you're going to end up downloading 50, 60 gig files for the first half and again for the second half, just to take out small elements of these. So we found a way, after speaking with the engineers of Blackbird and coming up with an idea ourselves, of mounting our main storage onto a Blackbird server. Just to let you know, we managed, this was all done within sort of about 48 hours or so of initially speaking to Ravi, getting a server installed on site, getting all the config done and deploying it and getting our users up and running. So it was incredible how quickly things were able to move, given how quickly we were told we have to work from home. So we mounted our file system on, and we found a fairly simple way of setting up user watch folders, which means that any of our editors have got their own spaces on Blackbird, which they already have on our main editing system. This allows our users, which I'll explain in a moment, to go onto our production asset manager via a web browser. So it's actually to lower this because of Zoom, which is called Strawberry. So this is our main production asset manager. We have a lot of content, or pretty much all of our content goes through here, and it's stored in various collections depending on the season and the sort of the content chain that it belongs to. For example, this is a preseason match that we played as part of the Mine series this season. As you can see here, we have the various parts from it in the clean feed, which is the clean coverage of the matches. We have first half, second half, a few of these sort of extra bits that we tend to capture on match day. Just hovering over here on the thumbnail, you can see these are about 55 gigabytes. If I was an editor working at home, I could download this entire thing if I wanted to clip out the goals, but that's not going to be a very smooth part of the workflow. So what we've done is utilize a fairly simple method within here of copying this asset. And I've set up already, this is all sitting on our main server, workflows that allow this content to push directly into my own or any of our users' watch folders for Blackbird. So I'm going to trigger this one off now, which I'll come back to in a bit before going back to Blackbird, which will start to copy that asset over into my Blackbird watch folder. Coming back to Blackbird. So that one may take a few minutes to copy over on our network, but compared to downloading at home, that's going to be far, far quicker. So there's a couple here which I have cooked up from earlier, which have already been ingested. So a lot of, I think the initial plan that we looked at with Blackbird was to get a lot of our editors who were traditionally working on Adobe to be able to edit directly on Blackbird exclusively. Now, this worked quite well for some of our lighter edits, for small highlights, which we were able to very, very quickly get turned around. The challenge came with some of our more long form content and for editors who tend to be very wedded to the production software that they're working with, so Adobe Premiere. So what we've done is come up with a hybrid use case for Blackbird here. So if I wanted to say, here's an Arsenal Newcastle game from earlier this season, and I wanted to nick some goals out of it, I can very, very quickly scrub through, find the sections I would like, add them to my timeline, and I can make very, very rough cuts here because I'm planning to download these elements separately and edit off them from whichever of my NLE of choice. So I'll just nick a couple of other little bits here. Build up my little storyboard. Now, one thing that when we're recording our match content especially, is we do require to maintain multi-channel audio. To give you an idea, we tend to work with AES pairs, for those who are familiar. So we often have up to 16 channels of audio on our content. Being able to ensure that we can download these clips with the audio separate is critical to the way that we edit our highlights. Now, a lot of lower res transcoded files, say for instance MP4, doesn't allow you to have this multi-channel audio and can be very difficult because it's flattening all that audio, which massively limits your ability to edit when you get home. We set up a couple of publish folders, which, to give you guys an idea, in case you haven't seen the UI of Blackbird too much, on the left-hand side, you have a list of your sort of published destinations. We probably don't use Blackbird the way a lot of people do in terms of publishing directly to our social channels. We tend to publish them to an area of our server, which allows us to publish them on into various places, as we do have a few different aggregators in terms of where stuff goes to afterwards.
That's pretty common for us. As you know, I think we're saying we talk about social publish is pretty ubiquitous, and we have a lot of customers that do that directly, but certainly. I would say most of our use cases, social isn't primary.
Gotcha.
When, as you're going to go into, with our customers, when we hand back into workflows for distribution to digital or VOD or OTT or whatever it might be, often that same distribution engine or network is handling the social. So yeah, it's a pretty common way for us to do it. We make sure we're handing off the content you need and the metadata you need, and then off it goes.
Awesome. Sorry, I probably misrepresented that slide.
No, not at all. No, you didn't say anything wrong.
Cool. So,
sorry to interrupt you.
No, all good. So in terms of what I've been doing here is clipping up. I mean, please excuse my editing skills. I'm by no means a good editor. This is very much my first edit style thing. I've clipped off a couple of little sections, which hypothetically I wanted to work on in more detail at home, add on and work in my familiar editor. We've set up a few different published destinations here, all of which have slightly different both codecs and data rates of what they're going to be used for, and slightly different use cases. Some of which may seem fairly obvious from the title. Say, for instance, Social Square will allow me to have a fairly light file, which in this case is an MP4, and it's already going to be square clipped off. And it'll be square safe in terms of the guidelines, which Blackbird does allow you to see. And it will automatically create that for you, allowing you to publish to social. The ones I think that we end up using the most are these local exports here, which maintains the channel layout and maintains these in a very high bit rate, so instead of being ProRes, these are now going to be MXFs, which is about 35 megabit per second in this case, which is perfectly acceptable for using in broadcast. And we found that to be a good balance of being still high enough quality, but still resulting in small enough files for editors to very, very quickly get this content from on-premise back home edited. So I'm just going to send this very quick example into here and to show you the rest of our workflow of how we've made these, at least for our heavier editors, and how they've been using Blackbird. So in Blackbird, you see this is very heavily used at the moment. Not always the best naming conventions, but I'm sure that's fairly common everywhere. This, my little edit I've just shoved in here is being queued up and will soon start to be processed by Blackbird and taking the section I've selected and rendering against the high-res footage which sits on our server. So this will spit out a short comp. It'll maintain the audio, as mentioned, it will maintain all the audio channels, and it will be downloadable by myself. Now, this server, we have also got another little bit of software which allows us to remotely see all of our storage sort of through a single pane of glass, whether this is our AWS, whether it's on-premise storage. We've set up, I'll very quickly show you this. It's called Storage Made Easy. It's, as it says in the tin, it's very easy to use. Just looking at what I've got here, all of our publish buttons that I was showing you on Blackbird, so for instance, the various publish destinations here, have outputs which pop out straight here. All of our journalists, all of our editors can access this, and it will allow them to send the content they want from Blackbird into the published formats that they require and very, very quickly download this. So once my edit that I've just done finishes rendering, it will pop up in this folder and I'll be able to download it. So there's quite a few clips in here of people who've been recently editing and sort of pulling down the MXFs to continue editing at home. Now this was really a game changer for us in terms of unlocking our heavyweight editors to edit from home. No need for editing over TeamViewer, no need for sort of rather painful remote connections into the office and editing that way. They would be able to sit in the comfort of their home and edit on the program of their choice, although we did, in a lot of cases, try to get them to use Blackbird. As I'm sure you say, it's not the easiest thing to convince people who've been using something for years and years and years to change, but this really, really worked for us and unlocked. I guess the biggest fear that we had was moving back home put at risk some of the deliverables that we had to do. And would this be feasible? Can we do them this way? Are we going to have to drop down our file size in order to facilitate this? Being able to clip out small sections very, very quickly, all remote, without having to download large files has been an absolute game changer. I can't stress enough how much this, and I think we found now, even though majority of people are back in the office, a lot of people are still working from home and still swear by this workflow. Yeah. And they're still very, very happy to use it, both from Blackbird's point of view, as well as being able to download through Storage Made Easy, which is sort of the one pane of glass section.
I guess it's worth quickly kind of clarifying for a minute there, talking a little bit about how Blackbird is architected when in terms of what we're looking at here. So just so everyone understands, we've got a couple of questions coming through kind of about that side of things. So essentially what we're looking at here, where Aliki is working inside Blackbird, is all in the cloud, completely hosted in a web browser interface. There's no local media on his machine. There's no connectivity into the core network or to the original media or anything like that. So the user level is completely distinct and it sits in the cloud and anybody anywhere can log in and access it. But when we're seeing content coming into the platform or publishing happening and all of this kind of thing, that is happening back on the original infrastructure. So essentially Blackbird's in two halves here. We've got the ingest and publish engine, and that piece of software that Aliki talked about is kind of getting a server in there as quickly as we possibly could. That reads from and integrates with the original infrastructure. And when we publish, that's where the publish happens. So it drops back into that original infrastructure. So essentially, even when there's content being moved or ingested and created and published and things like that, none of it is going anywhere near the user. And actually, it doesn't have to go anywhere near the cloud either. So for a lot of our customers, being able to separate the media infrastructure from the users is the key thing here, right? About giving access without having to give access to the storage or to the MAM or to the whatever kind of content management platform you're using as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and to add to that, it's also enabled us to work with freelancers a little bit more easily, being able to onboard people, give granular access through Blackbird to which sections they can and cannot see. It's
without ever sending them a file. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. They've got no need to download. They're able to come in, get things clipped off that they may need. And even from a point of view of just being able to come and view footage, it's been quite useful in that aspect, even if it's to just send a small edit that you've done in Blackbird up for review. One thing I would like to highlight is coming back to my earlier demonstration of Strawberry and sending a file is the way Blackbird ingests files. So I sent over a very large 55 gig file, which, as we can see, is slowly ingesting into my Blackbird folder here. To give you an idea, the green line underneath the majority of these shows all of these have been completed their ingest. This one, which I sent in earlier, which is the one that I sent over from Strawberry, this guy here, is still pending. It's, sorry, Zoom is hiding my browser from me. Is still pending in terms of its ingest, but it is sort of ingest on demand. So if I put this into my preview window, I can scrub through quite quickly to the section that I want. Even though it is not finished ingesting, I can jump to any part of the file, give it a second, and it will start to make sure it's following, it is ingesting the section that I would like to work on. So I don't have to wait for the full file to be completed before starting to work on it. Especially if you're trying again to do things very quickly, this is a massive difference. In a lot of cases, you are waiting for a finished file to have closed ends in order for it to be read and played back. And that is another bit that's just sped up the whole process so much.
And because we've got a question about that, about, you know, is everything accessible in real time in the cloud? And the answer is, you know, anything that you see in the Blackbird interface here is, and you can, it doesn't matter how long that piece of content is, you can open it, as Aliki's just shown us, and move to any frame at any point in an unlimited amount of media. In terms of the access to that, obviously we need to get it. So while we're doing an ingest, whether we've just seen a file or whether we've received a live stream directly into the platform, you're going to be working, viewing, editing, and publishing from that, normally around 5 seconds behind when we see it. So it's pretty fast. But the workflow that we're looking at today is one, as Aliki said, it's an on-demand one, right? So the user goes to the Strawberry, to the asset management tool, they select what they want to work on, and then we bring it in to make it editable. For lots of our customers, and again, it depends on the workflow, and depends on the use case and everything. We will just watch everything. So, you know, if you don't need everything, obviously there's a more efficient way to do that. So that, you know, in answer to the question there, it's up to you, but essentially you can have as much or as little as you want at your fingertips, or we can set that up and operate on a more kind of on-demand workflow there.
I suppose to add to that, we kind of have a hybrid use case in that, where we have our user folders here, where our users are getting their on-demand content sent in. But we also have a library, which Blackbird allows you to have a library which is not user editable. It means no one can come in and mess with this footage. It can't be deleted. And this is content that we find is always going to be reused and always going to be needed. This also includes our live ingest feeds, which we use on match days, both for our journalists to be remotely monitoring the match, in addition to clipping off match footage, as well as sending, for example, our OTT shows. So these were our match coverage from the game on Saturday. And for example, we'd have our journalists sitting across. These are finished live ingests, but on the day they would be growing files as you're watching them. You're watching the feed coming in. It'd be a growing file which you can clip off and very quickly stick small teasers on social media. You can very quickly stick pretty much any way you like in terms of getting eyeballs on your show. So I do find that that's been a really good driver to get people to see our content, because people can, our editors can or even our journalists, because of how straightforward Blackbird is, can jump on very quickly, see a live feed coming in, clip off the section they want, following the same process as I've done with the example down here, and get that content to wherever they need to. The other thing we found with our library is we also are able to add things like watermarks in here, which are going to be persistent across the board. So for instance, I could add our Arsenal crest right on top on this layer, stretch that out, and I've immediately added our Arsenal watermark to this export, which has simplified things a lot. Again, so we do have that kind of hybrid on-demand as well as perpetual stuff, which we sort of decide of what needs to be kept there permanently.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the most unique part of the workflow that we're using, and the majority of the use case of what we've done. So happy to look at, I'll stop sharing my screen so I can come back to some questions, and I can always reshare if there's any questions that
no worries.
Demoing.
Thanks, Aliki. Yeah, so I mean, we've hit our half hour, but I think we've still got everyone with us. So we'll keep going, because we've got a few questions coming in here. And yeah, thank you for kind of walking us through that. I'll give it to you, Aliki, to start off with.
Cool. Yeah, there's a question from Dinesh about the QC workflow.
Exactly.
And that is one that we do use Blackbird for QCing content. It's probably not worth sharing the screen again, but as to one of our publish options that we've set up is designed for QCing. So instead of this content being published back onto our server, it's published onto Blackbird's cloud, and a bespoke link is created, which I can send out to someone who needs to review my edits before it's published, and they can see the work I've done in Blackbird almost instantly. That is available within seconds of it being sent over, and it's been really, really useful. So QC it has simplified QC. You don't have to be sending each other your MP, like exporting a transcode, sending that over to someone to review. Blackbird has really simplified that for us.
He's obviously an Arsenal fan there as well, Aliki. You've got a nice hashtag on the end of that question.
Love it.
So there's another one here which I think it would be good to touch on, and it's asking about kind of Blackbird versus Premiere and that relationship. And you know, in a continuation of the question about QC, you know, Blackbird definitely overlap. You know, we overlap into the kind of functions that you would use a tool like Premiere for, but we're two different things. And that's something that we're, you know, in most of our customers, there's going to be a craft edit function sat in there. To give everyone on call a very, you know, a quick idea of that. Essentially, when you get into the, you know, the Blackbird editor proper, Blackbird supports up to 32 audio tracks, 16 video tracks, real-time blur effects and color correction, as Aliki showed us today, you know, multi-audio track management, voiceover, closed captioning, real-time transitions, and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's an extremely powerful editor. But you know, as a result of that, for a lot of our customers, Blackbird is the finishing tool for sports highlights packages and news editing and all sorts of things. But you know, we're not doing high-end professional color grading, high-end visual effects and image overlays. And as Aliki says as well, sometimes in complex edits, you know, you might have freelancers or users come in who have a preference for a particular tool. So, you know, the one thing we're very conscious of is improving workflows for our customers, speeding it up, cutting down the amount of media that's moving, therefore the amount of time people are waiting or the amount of cost to do with, you know, cloud egress and all sorts of issues that sit around that. Improving collaboration and access to media and you know, a whole variety of benefits. But if you've got platforms like we've seen Strawberry today, if you've got distribution methodologies, if you've got other editors in the space, you know, absolutely we want to be able to support those workflows and push that in there. So yeah, to the question about kind of a feature comparison, I would say when we're talking about building and constructing editing, you know, Blackbird's are pretty comparable to how you would use and what you would do in Premiere. When you get into the kind of the real craft finishing side of editing, that's where you're going to need a specialist tool for that.
Agreed. I mean, there's very, very, very few things that I've asked sort of Blackbird supporters whether Blackbird can do because I can't find it, and it is almost always there, and it's usually behind a very, very clever series of hotkeys or mouse clicks. And again, the UI has got a lot more than what you would think. It's incredible how much has been squeezed in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's you know, we've been building on it for a long time to get it where it is. So no, thanks, Aliki. Couple of other quick questions here. Can you download or publish in MXF? Yep, absolutely you can. And is there an on-prem solution for Blackbird? So actually the editor is always in the cloud, but exactly what we've been talking about today, the ingest and publish and all of the media, essentially your heavy lifting piece can be on-prem, absolutely. So you do not need to move your content to the cloud or even actually have any cloud infrastructure to be able to use Blackbird as a cloud editing tool or workflow tool. But your users are always going to be logged in to cloud there. There's a question which I'll throw to you, Aliki, and if the answer is no, then I'll address it. Is there any part of this workflow that's around reviewing and approving or kind of accessing before publish, or do your users all have the power to publish whenever they want?
I think it's a bit of a combination. I mean, some of our journalists who are doing social clippings will be sort of approving themselves before doing it, as it's very short pieces. For some of the longer bits, the edits themselves, as we discussed previously, are sent to that quality or QC publication, published destination, which allows that a link to be created, sent to whoever needs to approve the content, to quickly watch through, give his feedback, and then you can quickly make your edits. So there is a workflow built in that you can use for Blackbird to do that.
Yeah, Blackbird also has the ability to do like renderless publishing. So we can share an edit with someone externally without actually creating a piece of media at all. So yeah, it's a big part of it is about sharing without having to send content around. A question here about kind of AAF, actually, talking about Premiere and Avid workflows and so on, and compatibility with Avid systems as well. Yeah, absolutely. So we can output AAF files as basically an EDL from Blackbird, and you can take that back into Premiere or Avid. The difference there is that workflow relies on the Avid or the Premiere system being able to relink to the source. So for lots of our customers, Blackbird is an access layer to create and view and start to edit, but we would be reading off the same source as then a central Avid or Premiere. In the workflow that we've, Aliki showed us today, essentially the core problems being solved in the main edit team there is that the edits are not sat on the media, and we don't want to have to move all of that source to the edit. So obviously we're delivering content, but it is possible to deliver an EDL out of that as well. Cool. And just again, we've got a couple more, so we'll keep going. But before people have to leave, I will just let you know if you want to get in touch with us. There's an email up on the screen share now, so you can drop us an email in. And if you do have to go and get on with your day job, then thank you very much for attending. But we'll have another couple of looks at questions here. So there's one here about geographies, and obviously the Arsenal team are based in the UK, and so is Blackbird. So that makes that very easy. The question is, can users anywhere in the world work with Blackbird? And the answer is yes, actually. And that's something that's, again, enabled by the specific and unique technology that we have. So we have customers throughout the United States where we work. We mentioned A&E networks, lots of sports and news companies over there. I think maybe nearly 80 regional news stations across North America, Univision and CBS Sports and many other high-end customers over there, all the way around through Europe and Sky News in the Middle East and Sky News Arabia, out to the NRL in Australia. They all use exactly the same platform, and there's no discernible difference there. The key thing for that, just so everyone doesn't just have to believe me, is the way that Blackbird works. Like Aliki said, when he goes to a place in that timeline, the media around him will cache, and at that point then the user is actually working in their browser session. So we're not connected to another system. We're never sending to a server for previews. There's no latency issues, because the way that Blackbird's been built is that everything you do when you're viewing the media, when you're adding a transition or even color correction or blur or DVE picture-in-picture effects, whatever it might be, is being rendered by your actual browser session. And that's why it's so responsive and so powerful, because there really is no back end to worry about. So yeah, absolutely, you can use it anywhere, and you can use it anywhere on as little as 2 meg internet connection as well. So it's extremely efficient there.
Yeah, agreed. We did have a couple of users at the beginning of lockdown who had fairly slow home internet and were, again, 2 to 3 meg, and they were quite happily able to see the, essentially, as Ollie was saying, when you're working in your browser, you are viewing what are proxy files of the full res media. In our case, we've set those to 360p for our proxy files, which works really well for us in whether you're working within the Blackbird browser.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on live here. I've got a question about kind of live ingest formats. I can answer it very, very quickly. So the Blackbird system that's looking at and ingesting the file-based content on demand can also take RTMP, HLS streams, ZXC, very soon SRT. We can read growing and XS files as they're being written as well. I think with you guys, Alec, we take a think we take an RTMP of your studio feed, is that right?
Yeah, correct. So that we've got 2 RTMP live ingest points that we use, and we've set that up so that some of them are coming off our on-premise encoder, so that's on our local network, and we've also opened that up through our firewall so that our cloud studio that we sort of spun up, which is actually just running OBS, is able to stream back down into our facility and be ingested by our Blackbird server. And again, both RTMP.
Yeah, and again, what we're doing on the output of that is rendering against either that source RTMP or rendering against the source file. So the output can be whatever format and quality we can do set against that input. Excellent. All right. Well, I think we've answered most of the main ones, and we've run over by 15 minutes. So I'm also going to let you get back to your day job, Aliki. So just to finish, I'll say thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thanks for sticking around and listening to and asking so many questions at the end. It's always good when it gets interactive. And special thanks, Aliki, for giving us your time and talking us through how you use the platform.
Well, thank you guys very much for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to any future ones.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thanks all. Cheers. Bye.